Hello and welcome to the FinanceSmartz Entrepreneurship Series. Here is our host, Arul Nigam.
Welcome everybody. Today I'm excited to be speaking with Dr. Irving Weinberg of Weinberg Medical Physics. So Dr. Weinberg, just to begin, could you please briefly outline your career path and how you got to where you are today?
Well, it hasn't been the most linear career path, really. So I'm not saying that everybody should do this because it took a lot of time. So I originally started as a physicist, and I was doing experimental physics at that was after college. I did physics in college, and then I did experimental physics at University of California, Irvine. And then I heard a talk by Michael Phelps, not the swimmer, but the scientist at UCLA. And they were doing stuff on positron emission tomography that was really exciting. They were looking at how musicians' brains operated while they were playing, listening to music and writing music, and it sounded real exciting. So I worked for about 2 years there at UCLA. And then I went to medical school at University of Miami, and then did training at Johns Hopkins in radiology, diagnostic radiology. And I worked at the NIH for about 2 years, and then started, I worked as a radiologist and also worked in companies, little companies. So that's kind of where I did the entrepreneurial thing, is to build companies. And some of them did well, some of them didn't do well. But it's been very interesting and very challenging, and sometimes rewarding, sometimes painful. That's kind of what happened.
So what originally motivated you to become an entrepreneur and get into the business world after a long history in a more like scientific setting?
There was a friend of mine who had a company, and he had gotten grants. There are special grants for small businesses. And so I wrote a grant with him, and we were funded even though I was a resident in a training program, and that was a lot of fun. So I can't say that I really decided anything. I just kind of rolled with the flow and did that. And I still wanted to work in the clinic. So it's kind of a good mix, because as a radiologist, you can kind of work on an hourly basis. So I see patients about 2 days a week, and the other days I do research and development with small businesses. It would have been nice maybe to work in academia. I still work with academia. I'm on the board of advisors for several universities, but I don't know, it just didn't work out like that to be a faculty person at a university. But I do work closely with faculty members at universities.
So did you ever, like growing up or at the beginning of your career, did you ever plan to get into entrepreneurship, or it kind of sounds like maybe that was just a natural progression from based on where you were working and what your interests were?
So that's a really interesting question, because it kind of relates to what is an entrepreneur. And I would say if you have it's not really what's an entrepreneur, it's kind of how do you form a company. And so it's not just enough to say, well, you can't have a one-person company. It just doesn't work like that. You have to have people with different talents. And so generally what I have now is an incubator. Basically, we're organized as an incubator. So we launch companies, and our incubator is Weinberg Medical Physics. We're based in Rockville, Maryland, and so we've launched about 10 different companies over the last 6 years. Some of them done really well. Some of them haven't done so well. But anytime we launch a company, we put in there a technical person who is primarily involved in making things work. We also put in a financial person, somebody who has raised money and talks to investors and knows how to convince them and to massage them when things don't go so well. So there's always there's a team approach to it. So I'm not the MBA and the CFO. That's not what I am. I'm the medical guy who also knows a lot about the technical stuff. I know enough about the financial things that I can kind of evaluate whether the financial guy is doing a good enough job or not. But I don't do all of it. I start things, but then after I start them, I find some person who is who I would call more a financial person. So I'd say I'm an entrepreneur in the sense that I take risks and I start companies, but you can't just have one person. Um, there's also, so you have the guy who talks, you have the CEO who raises money and talks to investors, and you also have the sales and marketing person, and you also have the technical guy, and you have the regulatory person if you're dealing with medical. I would consider myself more of an inventor type. That's kind of what I like to do. And as long as people are paying me, enough stuff to live on, I'm happy with that as long as I can keep on building things. That's kind of what I do. So I would still consider myself to be an entrepreneur, but but um, but if you're talking about, the guys, I mean, Bill Gates didn't negotiate the contracts. Bill Gates came up with the technology, and he had a very good lawyer who worked on the contracts with him. Turned out probably his lawyer was related to his dad because his dad has a law firm there that's quite
Yeah.
good. So it's not really one person team.
Right. So
Okay.
could you talk a little bit more about that, about like how you build that team, especially I know there's a lot of people, young people who have backgrounds in science or engineering, but want to do something that will help a lot of people, and a business is the best way to do that, of course. So if you can you just talk a little bit about how, if you're coming from a technical perspective, you can pick the right team and start in the right place to build a viable and successful business that will allow you to do what you want to do on the technical side.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it's a little bit like dating, is you try to present as good put on your makeup, or a nice shirt, and get a haircut and stuff. And then you're at uh places where people either say, "Oh, that looks good. I'd like to work with you." So I mean, you can go out and find people, but I just think it's best to just do a good job and get something initially, initially interesting, and then kind of put it out there, whether it's through conferences or social media or press releases or something like that, because there are people out there who are complementary to you. So the most successful company we started was called Promaxo, and that was a fellow, his name is Amit Vohra, who had success as a CTO in a company that was doing image guided therapy. And he wanted to be CEO and was looking for some technologies that would kind of form the basis for the company. So he approached me at some conference, and we teamed together, and he brought in other people. So he's now got about 20 people working in Oakland and has raised quite a bit of funding and has done some really, really cool stuff. But it started out by, me just kind of doing my technical job and presenting things at some conference, and just hoping that there were people in the audience who had complementary skill sets to what I was doing. From their point of view, they're so busy raising money and writing business plans, they don't have the time to build things. So that's kind of the way that I look at it, is act well your part, for the honor lies, and try to do a good job, and people will find you. I mean, if you're in school, if you're in a school that has an MBA program, then often you can hang out with other people who, if you're the technical person, you can hang out with the business people, and they need something technical. Otherwise, if they're just doing the same thing as everybody else, if they're just making a better, I don't know, a better grocery store, that's not really scalable. They need something that's scalable and potentially has the chance to go viral and something that people will invest in. So, they're looking for that too.
So I guess it's about first of all, actually working on your idea and creating something that will attract people, and then making sure you're in the right place and in the right circles to find who will make up the best team. So I guess that's sort of getting at the idea of networking. So do you have any tips for viewers about the best way to go about that and how to build the right relationships and I guess just be efficient with that and find the right people?
Yeah, so the young guys are better at it than me because you've got all these new social media tools to play with. And all the conferences that people used to have, they're virtual now.
Yeah.
So and there are bots out there that are kind of doing the job of promoting folks. So I think you have to be open to change. We just did a crowdfunding campaign for one of our companies just to kind of stick our feet in the water, and that was very interesting. I don't think it was as profitable as some of the other ways that we've raised money, but it was interesting, and it's an evolving field. I was told in the last week that it used to be the maximum you could get from crowdfunding was $1 million from equity crowdfunding, and it's just gone up to $5 million. Wow. So, it's kind of hard to say what the future will be. And there's also different kinds of activities. So if you're a biotech, then what's important is to catch the attention of the strategic partners. Medical devices is a different thing, and there's this health IT, which is also a different animal. So I think you have to keep learning not only about your own subject matter, but also about how to interact, who to interact with. But it also boils down to people. So there's you have to find a person who's good at this, who's good at networking, and partner with them. And I've been lucky in recent years to have found people like that. The other thing is that we're quite global these days, and we just got rid of a president who felt that he could do it all on his own, and I'm hoping we'll go back to a more normal situation where the U.S. works with others. And so, for example, we've gotten funding from China, from India, from the U.S., from Canada, from Spain, and it's it's kind of fun. It's fun to travel, and it's fun to learn a new language and to interact with people.
So what you brought up at the end there is actually really interesting, and it gets at something I was wondering. So in the medical field and in biotech, as you were mentioning, obviously cooperation in research is very important, but in business, of course, competition is important as well. So how do you, in a unique field like you're in, where it's like it's a medical field, but from the business perspective, how do you balance those two, like cooperation and competition?
Well, actually, I would say that's kind of it's somewhat of a fallacy. So people think that universities are altruistic and companies are competitive, but it's actually the other way around. So we've worked with universities and we said, let's publish this. They go, no, I can't publish it. I got to wait until it's perfect. And then I'm going to publish it as first author, and then I'm going to get the grant. You can't tell anybody about it. I'm not saying everybody's like that, but I certainly have met those people. In business, there are kind of boundaries and the understanding is that you get something for giving something. You never have everything. So the person who is your rival today may be your partner tomorrow. And so it's just bad business to get people upset and to go, oh, he's my enemy or she's my enemy. It's you're competitors today and partners tomorrow. So you always have a certain respect for the person you're working with. Universities aren't always like that because it's kind of you're in a different relationship. You have the students versus the faculty, and the faculty sometimes get kind of I wouldn't say odd ideas, but kind of odd perspectives as to their role in life. Whereas in business, it's you always have to have respect for other people, whether they're working for you, with you, against you. So that's something I learned a lot by working with people, especially people in sales. Those guys, they may end up working for their competitors, in the next week. So you never want to burn bridges or get people upset in business. You may negotiate with them, but you negotiate in an honorable way, such that preferably everybody wins and there's no enemies, there's no losers. You're helping each other out in your own ways, and competition actually is good. So that's the classic thing that people talk about in a business plan, is if you say in your business plan, oh, I have no competition, the investors are just looking at you and going, oh, okay, you really don't know anything. There's always competition, even if it's indirect competition, which is the status quo. There's always competition, and if there's no competition, it means that you're in a field that nobody cares about. So you always want them to be you want to have some competition. You can't be a me too, all the time. You can't just do the same thing that everybody else has done. So you have to look at it from a different angle. But competition is actually a good thing.
That's really interesting. I actually, with the dynamic you were talking about before between academia and business, I didn't think of it like that before, but that actually makes a lot of sense. Could you just elaborate on it? It sounded like perhaps you were hinting at some challenges that you faced in the past dealing with that dynamic. So could you just elaborate on any others of the biggest obstacles that you faced in your field, and how you overcame them, and just advice for or lessons learned from that?
One of the things that's interesting is I really like innovation. Some people are better at marketing and saying, well, you can pitch something in a different way. I kind of enjoy innovation. That's not necessarily the most profitable way to do it, but that's just kind of what I like to do. And so what I've seen is that things go through a cycle of initially it's just, well, that'll never work, to oh, that was obvious, and
Right.
you have to be just kind of in the middle there. And that's been a lot of fun for me, is to interact with professors and smart people, and they go, that's impossible. And I just say, well, I've been through this before, and there was this one guy who said that. He goes, that's just impossible. I said, you're going to end up investing in this just at a higher valuation. And that's actually what happened. He ended up investing, but at a later stage. So he had to pay more for it. But that's okay. It's a question of risk. Some people would rather, pay more for something at less risk. So I've seen that. I've seen that a couple of times, and it's really a lot of fun to get into a situation where people say that'll never work. And we have, as an incubator, we train people from university, and that's one of the things I like to assign to them, is to say, here's a project. It's a really, really, really hard project. So I want you to do it so that you'll feel like you've accomplished something, when you've done it. So that's kind of a fun thing. When I did my PhD thesis, I was very fortunate have had a project where, we could go from just concept to a product, to testing and publication. A lot of people, when they do their thesis, it's just some little wrinkle of, of adding a little bit of information. But for me, it was a lot of fun. So that's what I like to do when we have young people, is to say, okay, here we're gonna, this is gonna be your idea. Let's see you get it. Let's see you get it done. So to me, I think that's the fun part of it, is having a technical challenge and overcoming that challenge.
That makes sense. So basically, I just wanted to ask about the next step after the process you were describing, with starting with a problem that might seem unsolvable, and then iterating and developing until you get to a solution. So after that, in your industry, especially, would be like the approval process and the regulatory hurdles you have to cross. So could you just talk a little bit more about how those challenges affect your business and what you do, and just any insight about how that affects life as an entrepreneur in the medical technology space?
Okay, so I guess two points about that. The first is that you need to have a person who is a regulatory person, regulatory guy or girl, because it kind of requires a certain discipline, and it's a little different from the other from kind of the other talents that comes into the team. There are people who specialize in this, and they make it their life's work. Often they worked at FDA before, and now they're in the role of helping other people. So either as a consultant or a member of the team. So that's kind of on the person side, just pointing out that is a special skill set that needs to be part of the team, either contractually through a consultant or as a partner or employee. In the second aspect, so I've worked with a bunch of regulatory people, and I think the attitude should be that they really want you to succeed. That would be their preference. If you're an FDAer, some people get points because they stop thalidomide, but most of them, they really want to see things work, and they're frustrated when the sponsor is not responsive to what they, the FDA, feels are necessary in order to make a safe and effective product. So they generally put out guidance documents and say, well, we want to see this and this and this. And it's best to just follow the guidance documents and talk to them. And I've had a lot of very rewarding interactions with the regulators, where they've said, you know what, it'll make our lives easier and your life much better if you call it this. And that saves a lot of time, and everybody's happy. So I just don't think of them as being regulatory barriers. I think there are kind of checklists that need to be followed in order to produce a safe and effective product, and that under ideal circumstances, or even under normal circumstances, the regulator is out there to help you to get this product into the marketplace. Now, there's reimbursement, which you didn't mention, which is also quite challenging. And so generally there are people who are expert in that. And so preferably you want to do something that's already reimbursed. That is, let's say you build an MRI because there's already a reimbursement for that. If you have to create something totally new, then you have to get a new reimbursement for that. And that can be challenging. So reimbursement is something that you want to think about from the get-go when you're designing a medical product or coming up with a company that is devoted to medical products. Now, another alternative is you make a veterinary product, and we've done that using the same technology we were building for humans, and we've done that with one company, and it's being used in racehorses now. and we're doing it with another company, which will also be for small animals. So veterinary, the regulatory and reimbursement environment is much less challenging and faster. So that's another alternative approach.
That's interesting. So I guess it's maybe not as daunting as people most outside observers generally think it is.
Well, for drugs, yeah, for new drugs, it can be very, very expensive. But for medical devices, it can be quite reasonable. With tens of thousands of dollars, you can get FDA approval, potentially, depending on what you call it. If you have some new brain robot surgery, that can be expensive. If you have some new widget to make mammography more pleasant, that's not very expensive. So it kind of depends on the product.
That makes sense. And so just I guess since since Weinberg Medical Physics has spun out multiple companies, you probably have a lot of experience answering this next question, which is basically, how do you know when you have the right idea? Because obviously everyone has a lot of ideas that they think are good all the time, but of course to actually build something and bring it to market is a different story. So how do you decide when you have the right idea and if it's worth going forward and actually developing it?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people have thought about that. So there's this recent movement towards lean startup. That's kind of the latest. I think that's been hot for the last couple of years. And the basic concept there is that you survey your customers. So you talk to 100 customers and see what they think. Now, there's some weaknesses about that. I think Henry Ford said that if he was to go do customer surveys, he would find out that people want a faster horse. So if you're really too far ahead, then you kind of have to trust in the product and say, well, where do I think this will be useful? But that can be long. It can be a very long haul. So I guess those are the alternatives. You can go out and survey, or you can kind of try to say, well, okay, well, what do I think this will be good for? What you don't want to do is just fall in love with the technology and say, oh, this is a better mousetrap. You really have to say, what value is this going to add to the customer? And not only the customer, but also the practitioner, because the patient is not necessarily going to determine what tool is used. It's going to be the particular specialist who says, well, I want to use this tool. And their motivations may be different than the patient's. Their motivation may be, well, I want to use the least risky tool so that I don't get sued for malpractice. Or they may say, well, I want to use a tool that has the highest reimbursement because I get paid the most. They are interested in better outcomes because, a happy patient is a happy practice, but it may not be their main consideration. And certainly if the other considerations are critical, then that's going to affect how this product is going to get into the marketplace. Also, distributors are very, very critical. So if you're building a product that's going to compete with, Johnson and Johnson, well, you may want to just compete to the extent that they buy you out, or that one of the competitors of Johnson & Johnson, because their power in the marketplace is such that you can't make it. General Electric used to buy companies just to bury their products. So some companies have a reputation that is more innovative than others. So there are companies who their business model is never to be first in the marketplace with a new product. Never. There are companies who like to be first. You can imagine the automotive industry before Elon Musk got involved, there was very, very, very little innovation. And so medical devices, in some parts of medical devices also, there was very, very little innovation, or just very, very incremental innovation. There are some new companies coming out. So Hyperfine introduced a product that was a small MRI for the brain, and had a very good valuation for that. The guy who started Hyperfine had spent many, many years building a very portable ultrasound unit. So he had paid his dues, but having done that, he was then ready to move very quickly into another field. Elon Musk is playing a little bit with neuro tools, which is a very growth area. There are neighborhoods that are more entrepreneur friendly than others. So, for example, the company that we had started, which is a urology company that I mentioned, that's Premaxo, and they moved out to Northern California because they said they would get a higher valuation and it would be easier to raise money there, and that was the case. So there are kind of hubs that are more entrepreneurial than others, and so Boston is one of those hubs.
Yeah.
Maryland is, I would say, a second tier hub. Maybe we try harder, but San Francisco is a great place. Shanghai is a great place. Shenzhen, great place. Paris. So there are some places that are better than others. Now, because everybody's doing Zoom, things are changing. So maybe that'll change. Don't know.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out and affects, once we're out of the pandemic, how things are going to be affected. So, Dr. Weinberg, just one final question. What would be your parting words of wisdom for any young entrepreneurs out there, or aspiring entrepreneurs who are listening to this? Just words of wisdom for what to do and how to proceed if they're interested in becoming an entrepreneur, regardless of what industry, in what they should do now, and what they should focus on to prepare themselves.
Yeah, I guess to me, I don't know that entrepreneur is really what it's about. To me, it's about having a dream, following a dream, and then feeling like you can raise money to carry that out and to implement it. Ronald Reagan kind of made the word entrepreneur into something admirable. Prior to that, it was kind of considered bourgeois, or and it just wasn't considered to be a very exciting phrase. But I personally think that the entrepreneurs these days that are successful are the dreamers who are willing to work hard and to partner with people to make a team that will be successful. So I don't consider Elon Musk to be an entrepreneur. I consider him to be kind of an engineer who was willing and had the energy to put together a team. Sergey Brin, I don't think initially he wanted to say, well, I'm going to go and make $1 trillion. I mean, I think it was more, hey, I've got this fun thing that I'm going to put together. So to me, it's more, have a dream that you think will be useful to people. That's where the value is being useful to people, and don't be afraid of pursuing it and finding people to help you raise money to make that dream a reality. And the more exciting it is these days, the easier it is to raise money. That's kind of what all this crowdfunding thing is about. So I consider entrepreneurs to be kind of dreamers who are excited and are just they're not easily cowed. They're not easily bullied. They're just they just keep on plugging away. And my experience was it's just been a lot of fun to see things from the level So we had this COVID. We now have a COVID company, and we had a product that was just, I just woke me up in the middle of the night and they go, wow, this thing ought to work. And I've had that happen multiple times. It's just, hey, this might work. And to get from that took about, 3 years from the, this might work to, wow, that's the first time anybody's actually seen a metabolic image of a breast cancer, with a, in a single duct. So, it's just, if you work hard, you can make something that is really a dream into a reality. And, you'll find people who want to make money along the way. But that's kind of my perspective. If you talk to one of the CPAs, they'll have a different perspective. But that's kind of it's the way I look at it.
Well, that was really inspiring, and definitely a lot of the advice you've given, I think will be very helpful for me and for all of our viewers. So I really appreciate your time, Dr. Weinberg. Thank you so much for taking a little out of your busy schedule to help all of us out.
Okay, so I say, Tsai Jin. See you later.